This podcast is brought to you by ThamesCon, bringing conventions to Oxford and London, including the Great Conjunction, the first ever Dark Crystal convention in the world. For more information, visit their website at www.thegreatconjunction.com. And to our Crystal of Truth TR Patreon member Albert Chessa. Albert's a fellow Aussie and Dark Crystal fan who's actually been on Trial by Stone as a guest before. He makes intricate pattern prints, the kind you'd find a mystic carving into the sands in the forests of Thra. So if you like the Dark Crystal, there's a good chance you'll like his patterns too. You can check out his art and entertainment podcast on Apple, Stitcher or Google just by searching Albert Chessa. That's Chessa, C-H-E-S-S-A. And check out shirts, products with his patterns on them at albertchessa.com/store.
Another world, another time,
in the age of wonder.
You are listening to
Trial by Stone.
Trial by Stone!
Dea, Tea, Dara, Tea,
Your vital essence, the Dark Crystal.
Kida, Kida,
Come, see for yourself.
Aru, Garu,
How very interesting.
Dea, Tea. I feel the song of Thra in my heart. Now go, you heroes of Thra.
Hello and welcome to Trial by Stone. I'm your host Philip and just want to say thank you so much for tuning in as we talk all things Dark Crystal and interview people who are fans or have worked on the show. And on this show, we've got a very special guest. Her name is Shannon, and she was the visual effects editor on the Dark Crystal Age of Resistance. And it also, you also host a Star Wars podcast called Postcards from On the Galaxy's Edge. So, Shannon, I just want to say thank you so much for being on Trial by Stone.
Oh, I'm very excited. So, yes, you did your research. Yes, Postcards from the Galaxy's Edge. Yes, I do a Star Wars podcast.
Yeah. and I was actually just curious, what is your podcast all about? I know, of course, it's Star Wars theme, but is there something anything more to it, or just news or discussions or, yeah?
Yeah, it's funny, actually. Very recently, I became part of a network of Star Wars podcasts, and each one has its own kind of unique selling point. So one's like a live show, one's like a news show, one's like fanboys geeking out, one's collecting, and mine I do cover the news and things like that, but it's also I kind of deep dive with the visual. I always have kind of the visual effect and post-production perspective on it, so I always bring that to it, especially a lot of things Jon Favreau, because I've also worked on 2 projects with Jon Favreau, not personally, but he was the director of them, so it's quite interesting to have that little insight kind of thing. So that's where mine's a bit different, and also each episode broadcasts from a canon planet and things, so I always add it'll have a soundscape, and the postcard will be animated, and yeah, so it's unique in that way.
Oh, that is awesome. Yeah. Definitely for anyone who loves the Star Wars, definitely check that out. As I sure I will as well. So that is really awesome. So I guess, before we get into sort of talking about Age of Resistance, I'd love to know just a bit about your background. I know you mentioned that, your sort of background is in sort of visual effects editing or in post-production. And I'd love to know, how did you get into that industry for yourself?
Oh wow, it was very much a magical mystery tour. I knew I wanted to do editing when I was in high school, which I'm going to age myself now, but that was 2002, 2003. I'm the class of 2003. And digital editing was just kind of in its infancy. We talked about this slightly offline. That's, there was Final Cut Pro and things like that, but I always loved performance and music and things like that, but I loved technology, and I was able to kind of combine both of those loves into editing. It was just, how do I get there? So, I went to college, and I actually ironically was on a musical theater scholarship, and but I was in such a small town that we just made short films on the camcorders with the mini DV tapes, and then I digitized them in real time. None of this GoPro. Your files are like transferred over in minutes.
I guess for the listeners, I mean, these are back, with the mini DV tapes, essentially, when they're all in standard definition. It was the 720 by 576. Definitely remember filming quite a few little videos like on those cameras and with those tapes, and
oh yes,
especially like digitizing them,
in real time. Oh my god,
that you just had to. It was in real time, nevertheless, especially with good old Firewire. So
yes,
how far we've certainly come since then,
oh yeah. But after that, I decided I knew I would never be like a stage performer, so I actually went to a film school in Colorado, because I'm originally from the States. Like, I live in the UK now, but originally from the US, and went to film school for a couple years in Colorado, and then started working in television, and then about 2010 moved to the United Kingdom, and in about 2014, all this time I was kind of editing, offline editor. Basically, for people who don't know what an offline editor is, that's kind of the person who does the creative assembly kind of thing, and just really kind of fell into visual effects on accident. I worked on a few commercials. Funny story, that GIF with Kermit the Frog sipping the tea, that was me. I wasn't the creative editor, but I was the visual effect editor. And to explain kind of what a visual effect editor does is we basically get the edits from client, and then we have to kind of give the information to all the artists. And so there was like a naming convention, like how are the files named, broken down into shots, given to the artists, and the artists give it back to us, and we have to make sure basically the edit stays intact, but we add the visual effect shots and then give it back to clients. So for Dark Crystal, it's Netflix. Lion King, it's Disney. So that's kind of, we're like what I call the revolving door in the visual effect industry. Basically, we bring things in and bring things out, and it's a seamless kind of movement.
Yeah, so because my background is I'm assistant editor, and the visual effects element, it sort of seems to be sort of almost the equivalent of the assistant editor, but instead of dealing with shots and footage and raw footage and all LUTs and all these all these jargon that we sort of have to, codecs and so much more, that your focus is purely on the visual effects. With a show like for example with Dark Crystal, which I can imagine. I think for yourself, I think you worked with did the visual effects editor, I think for 2 episodes. I think with episodes 4 and 9. I guess I could just imagine just like the amount of shots that you would get, on a daily basis, or just putting them on the systems and everything. That must be like, you think, you can do all 10 episodes, but with Dark Crystal, it seemed like very a complex kind of show to deal with, like in regards to the visual effects side of things.
When I moved to kind of where I'm currently at the moment, I had just come off The Lion King, which was a very big show, but then this show, Dark Crystal, was the biggest TV had ever had, so they were a bit kind of overwhelmed, and that's why they actually were like, hey, we think you should come on to this because you kind of have some experience. And it's interesting because we have a term called turnover, where basically that's when turning over all the shots. And it's funny that you mentioned all those technical things, because we do need to still know those, because we have to share that with the people who do our digitizing, and the artists might need to know these things. And color, oh my god, color is just color science.
Yeah, listen, that's a whole novel world. Yeah. Oh
my god, it's very.
Especially I know, like especially now than what it used to be. 5 or 10 years ago, like with the introductions of LUTs, and then I guess with 4K, like the HDR, like nits.
Well, every camera has their own idea of like what the color red is supposed to be. Oh my god, But yeah, we would get episodes turned over, so I could be sitting there, you know, ready to go for a couple of days, and then all of a sudden it's like we get an email at like 8 o'clock at night, kind of going, okay, here comes episode 4, here's all your turnover. And I mean, it was hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of shots, because it literally was every shot in the sequence. I mean, and it could be simple things like, oh, okay, we're removing, you know, the rods, or they did some really cool stuff, something called facial augmentation, which is the puppets would move, you know, their mouth did move, but you can't, I mean, even with modern day puppets, I mean, Babu Frick on Rise of Skywalker is fantastic, but you can't get the little smirks or, you know, the little subtle eye movements, and that's where facial augmentation comes in. Another great example, I'm sorry a lot of these are Star Wars, but they do go kind of in tandem, is I think his name's Krill or Kroll, God, I'm terrible, from The Mandalorian. That mask is moving on set, but then you just have little help with visual effects to make it just a little more believable. But there's something about puppetry, and I think Dark Crystal really kicked that door open. Like, funny story, when the company was pitching to do this, they actually wanted to do it completely digital. You know, there's a test of the gelflings running down the hallway, I think running from a silk spitter, I think that's what they're called, and it was completely digital. And then I don't remember who thought, you know what, actually, let's do all puppets. Let's do it.
Do it that way. And because I remember, I don't know if this is sort of the same thing, the same video that was in the Crystal Calls documentary, and it was pretty much that test between a CGI Gelfling versus a puppet Skeksis, with Miro sort of running away from the Skeksis, and so that's the one. So I mean, it was a very interesting test, and I mean, I'm certainly, you know, thank goodness that they sort of, you know, decide, well, this CGI purely for the Gelfling just doesn't work. And of course, I think when they try to do, you know, an augmentation test, and you know, as a possibility, and I guess like one of the examples I can really think of that that I guess with that facial augmentation is definitely on Deet, and especially with her eyes, that like a good bulk of it was all just pretty much replaced. All, you know, her eyes was essentially digital, and I guess that must have been, was that probably one of the most challenging aspects, like, you know, with her eyes, because her eyes are black essentially, or dark. Was that something that was really hard, you know, for them to get the right, you know, the right level of blackness, or, you know, right level to get her eyes feel really believable?
Well, I feel bad, and I'm not trying to be. Actually, no, the eyes were black. Like, they didn't digitally change anything, the colors or anything. The only things that really kind of the facial augmentations were like brows, mouth, maybe eyelids. Eyelids was a thing, but I know I saw episodes where, because when she's in episode 9, I believe, she's like fainted or something like that, and I mean, the puppet definitely had the black eyes. So I think the puppet kind of did all that. They may have like maybe taken reflections out or things, but no, they there was never any color changing or anything like that. I feel bad about saying that you're wrong. It's just
no,
definitely no.
Oh, okay, so so her eyes weren't always like CGI. It was only like some certain moments, or not at all. That's what I'm
not
curious
at all.
about,
I think maybe not at all. I mean, maybe at the end of episode 10, where obviously, I'm sorry the term, but like all the purple essence or whatever.
Oh,
is,
the darkening, yes,
that,
yeah. Mm.
Yeah, the darkening, thank you. That was probably enhanced. That's definitely what they call FX, which is the department in visual effects that does all that cool simulation kind of stuff. But no, I promise, like her puppet. Now, she did have a digital double, what we call a digi-double. So when she did some of the flying stuff, it was cool. They did have puppeteers. There's like 3 of them, you know, 2 for the front and 1 for the legs and the back. So when she's flying through the village, that's not Deet, is it? That's
well, I know. I think
else.
That might have been, I know Brea, that would have been Brea.
That's it, it's Brea.
When she's
Sorry.
when she's going up the stairs in the library, and I definitely noticed that was a digi.
Deep was through the caves.
Yeah, through the
Deep
caves
was
across.
through the caves
Yeah.
where she was.
Yes, yeah.
Sorry, as I bless him, I said to Philip, I was like, "You're gonna have to forgive me. My names are gonna get mixed up." And
Oh no,
I could
that's
just
all right.
hear
Yeah.
fans going, "How do you not know these names?" I'm
You
telling
worked
you,
on the
you're
show.
just- yeah.
No, it's all
Yeah,
good. Yeah,
it's like, I
yeah,
could see
yeah.
But yeah, so the cool thing was for the close-ups, they were still filmed as puppets, but for obviously the very wide shots, there was a few digital, what they call digi-doubles, that were made to kind of help. So I mean, of course, none that will have, eyes and things, but that's what was so fantastic. These puppets were so fantastic that we didn't have to touch a lot. Like, it literally was just kind of, okay, just make it smile a little more. That's, and it'd be these kind of sliders in the software Maya and Nuke that they'd be able to just manipulate the performance just so it's just that little more that obviously they couldn't do in 1982 and the original one. But yeah.
Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah, I mean that's something. Yeah, I was really surprised about. Yeah, with Deet's eyes. I don't know. I thought they were always sort of digital, like throughout the entire show. So I was surprised that they were,
that would have been so expensive.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, that's awesome. Yeah. I was just really surprised about that. Yeah, so that sort of took me off for a bit. So all these reports you read and that, and yeah, so that was really interesting.
Well, yeah, and I'm happy to could be like, actually, not technically, but I also thought it was a cool attention to detail though, because obviously her character is underground, so I thought that was very cool that her eyes would be different than the other Gelflings because her people are underground. So I was like, oh, that's cool. That's it. And I didn't even click that until actually watching when it was on Netflix and talking to my better half. And she was like, oh yeah. I was like, oh.
Yeah, I mean the Gelflings, like what they did with the show was just marvelous, and just being able to expand like on all these different Gelfling clans. And I know like for fans of Dark Crystal that sort of knew about these clans through books and whatnot, but to see them like on screen was absolutely incredible. Just to be able to see them all and what they all look like and all that kind of stuff. So so it was really cool.
Yeah, funny story, inside little thing there. That opening kind of explanation where they were like, these are the clans. This is, where the so-and-sos are from. That was a last-minute addition.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's really interesting, yeah.
That was literally one of the last things that we were wrapping. And I think some of the graphics in the beginning were done by a different company. But they were like, we might need to kind of explain this a little bit, kind of the Game of Thrones kind of map section. We always joked and called it the Game of Thrones kind of opening shot, but yeah, so that was literally probably one of the last things to leave the building. Was actually one of the first things you saw in the show.
Oh wow, that is so cool. Like, because I definitely remember. I mean, for me, like my background's in post, so I think there was actually a video that came out, which I'll try and put in the show notes. But I don't know where it was. I think it was DNEG. There was this. They demonstrated how they did the prologue, and that it was all essentially done in After Effects. Yeah, with the prologue. And so I guess with Age of Resistance, like, what programs was used like throughout the show? Was it all After Effects, or was there like other programs that were using? Yeah.
Well, it's funny that you say that because you mentioned it, but yeah, at DNEG, that's where I'm at. Like, we didn't use After Effects, so that's why I think that was a shared project where there was another company that did the After Effects kind of elements, and then we edited it in with I don't know. That one was an interesting one, but I know for most of the stuff, it's softwares like a compositing software from the Foundry called Nuke. I know, there's, I think, texturing done in Houdini. I mean, they're like the big boy softwares. And then stuff was done in Maya. But another thing in the visual effect industry is every company makes their own self-proprietary software. So that's why sometimes, like, when you see films that are done by several companies, like the Marvel films and things, if you've ever seen Rocket and go, why does his fur look different in that sequence, but in that sequence looks a bit different? That's because, for example, every visual effect company has their own fur simulator. It's not an off-the-shelf software, so it's kind of the same thing. So we had some self-written tools as well, so it's a whole conglomerate of things kind of put together. But I don't think we have After Effects in the pipeline. Really, the only Adobe thing we do have is Premiere that we use, the visual effect editors use, and some Photoshop. But I don't think After Effects. That's why I think I was a bit, because I know what video you're talking about. I was like, really? I was like, because we also, as part of visual effect editor, we're one of the people that prep the data packages to send out the building. So I would have seen like an AE script or something. That's why I was like, really? It was After Effects? I was like, hang on, I think this is like a joint thing. It's a shame because the guy who worked on episode 1, because the prologue was even its own like project done separately. So yeah, it was a bit of a nightmare, but it's a shame. I should ask James, like he would know, because he was in charge of that, but I don't. I'll have to ask some people that we still work together. It might be like, wasn't that After Effects, or what was the story about that? But, yeah.
Yeah. That's really interesting. Yeah, with After Effects, being for the prologue, pretty much for a good bulk of it. Yeah. Because I know for me, like, getting into filmmaking, and I definitely remember, like, with Lord of the Rings, special extended editions, and even being introduced, I think with, you probably know what I'm talking about, with all these battles, and that they were all done by, I think it was like their own program, but then it became Shake, which I know, years later Apple bought it, and then it got discontinued or whatnot. But so that's always been interesting about how visual effects companies sort of have their own sort of software, that you use purely for your own projects that aren't available anywhere else. So was there things like through Age of Resistance that, like, with software, that you sub out with the company that they actually had to build, like, just for the show?
I can't really comment on that.
No, that's all right.
A guarded secret, but there definitely was like inside tools. But yeah, I can't.
Okay,
Sorry.
Oh no, of course, no. I mean, insider secrets, I guess. So no, that's fair enough. But very interesting nonetheless. That, of course, when you have software, that's exclusively to the companies, and that. Yeah, like especially with big projects like Age of Resistance, I can definitely imagine that, some tools would have had to be made to make things achievable.
I do know kind of the software that does usually have to be a lot of things written from scratch is FX and simulations. So I do know for like Pirates of the Caribbean, for example, they couldn't just use an out of the box because they needed the water to do such specific things. Same for Lion King, the grass, it needed to move in such a specific way that sometimes it's actually not easier, but you have more control if you write it yourself than doing something out of the box. I can say this because it's been so long now. I know for the Jungle Book, they tried using SpeedTree for a long time because we needed to build all this jungle, but it just didn't do enough that they ended up going, we're just going to write something ourselves. And then, so it's definitely, you're seeing kind of in examples that there's a reason why they have to, because each project needs something so specific or support something so specific that unfortunately, you can't just go, yep, Maya can do that. It can, but it's tricky.
For sure. And so I guess, because you worked on, just two of the episodes, with episodes 4 and 9. I mean, I'd love to know just sort of what was some moments like throughout, working on the show, like some visual effects work that was like really challenging to pull off, like initially, like, once you got the, going through all that footage, and then, how just, I guess, the process from, from dailies and then all that work that went into the visual effects.
I can definitely say the ones that were the hardest, it might not have even because of the technicality of it, or like the technical aspect, it was more of the communication aspect, is the dream fast sequences. Oh, those dream fast sequences. Yeah. Because you're using footage from previous episodes, because we all were in the same room, but you're like, do you label it as a new shot? Do you keep it as its current shot? Because that's all a billing thing. I don't know a lot of the logistics of production and the billing and things like that. But to quote, make something a new shot, it's so expensive. And also it clogs up the pipe. So for example, in episode, it's either 4 or 9, I'm sorry. It's where they're in the, I think it's 4. They're in the cavern.
Being the fall.
And
the puddling
close-ups.
house, puddling tavern.
Yes. Oh, I love that sequence. Oh.
Oh no, I know, me too. Yeah. I would have to say episode 4 is probably one of my favorite episodes of the show. Just it's because taking a step back and just thinking about each episode. Episode 4 certainly has a lot going on. Not only introducing characters of course with Naya and Kylan, but you also had Skekmal. And then you had the whole end fight scene between father and son and Skekmal, and that episode, that must have been a pretty jam-packed, It
was, each sequence was kind of its own one. So with the Dream Fast, it sounds so silly, but this is how complicated communication is with visual effects. The shots where you see the symbol basically burnt into the wood, they did it out of order. They were like, oh, it's shot 200, 220, 210. And they were like, well, can we just rename the shots to be 200, 210, 220? And we literally had to be like, we can't. It will break our pipeline because there's so much involved. I can't even try to think of an analogy right then. So we literally just finally, as the editor, had to go to production and go, we can't, this is gonna break, because you sometimes have to be a technical liaison, because production, they might not know all the technical insight. So we were like, you have to go back to the client and just tell them it has to be 200, 220, 210, because otherwise you're looking at 2 weeks of trying just to rename something. It's just like
yeah. And so just to rename
to answer
things
that question,
backtrack. That's
yeah. And then it's also, we had to, because someone else was doing the transitions. I think it could have been Netflix doing it themselves. So the little kind of glowy transitions, someone else was doing. So we had to do the math of how many frames are you getting. There's something in visual effects where each shot has something called handles, which is basically additional frames that aren't shown in the cut. So you can do things like transitions, or sometimes they can change an edit once it's delivered, they can slip it, kind of thing. So we had to tell them, well, how many frames do you want? And it was such a technical headache. So sorry to answer that question. It was just, that was the most, which is funny because it's actually not that difficult from a technical standpoint, but from a communication and a logistical standpoint, those Dream Fast sequences were a nightmare.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it certainly took its time, just to, just imagining, just a process, from start to the finished product is, completely different. That's so cool, yeah. And, I'm just trying to think, and what was sort of of course, the challenging things were, of course, like you said in episode 4, the dream fasting. But what was some shots that was sort of, for you, was like, oh, that was an easy one to process, or
I can't think of an easy one. I think because it was so big and overwhelming that I think it was just. I think you were just happy when the sequence was delivered. You're like, okay, great. I can say the show had wrapped. And it had premiered on Netflix, and Netflix came back to us, and I think it's episode 10. Whoever's the creatures that have their mouths sewed shut or the eyes sewed shut, there's a shot where you could see
Kevin Clash. Yes, yeah.
You can see his head through the cage. Yeah, so we had to all of a sudden open the show back up, paint him out, and deliver the show again. And I don't know if they ever fixed it, but that showed how, like, Netflix, they're able to basically just replace the file but not lose the link kind of thing. So I think it's episode 10. It's when basically all hell's breaking loose. It's very quick. Like, you blink and you miss it, but there was 2 shots where you saw, luckily, the gentleman is black, so it was darker, but the puppeteers, that was another thing, was just sitting in dailies kind of going, oh, there's a puppeteer, we need to paint him or her out, and things like that.
Yeah, I know. I mean, that must have been a bit of a challenge, trying to paint out, some of the puppeteers. And I remember, like, I heard that one, with down in episode 10, and but it was interesting, just how quick of a turnaround I guess that was. Trying to do that within, and I guess that's the thing, like, especially with technology these days, it's like, well, it's easy just to replace it, just replacing those shots, and then putting it back into the master file. You don't, it's like, I know usually in the days where it's like, oh, if there's a couple of mistakes in the edit, then you got to re-export everything and, do it all from scratch. And, but it's cool that, moments like that you can sort of, get to, just sort of do these quick little fixes. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, it was literally just 2 shots, but it was hilarious when we heard that. We were like, what? And then sure enough, we pulled it up on Netflix on our phone, and we're like, oh my God, yeah, there it is. So, yeah, we're like, God, how did that get there? But, that happens. I mean, obviously we know about, like, the Starbucks Cupgate. I mean, look at that, Game of Thrones, like, people saw it on the premiere, and then, like, it's gone now, like, it's digitally painted out kind of thing. So that's the thing with a human art, there still will always be mistakes. But so that was a fun day. We were just like, what?
Yeah. Just came out of nowhere. And I mean, especially like with DNEG, that, like, you guys were like the sole vendor, like, for this one show, which seems to be a very rare like occurrence, I guess, because I mean, most feature, like, for example, I mean, with feature films, that they usually have multiple, visual effects studios that work on certain sequences or certain shots here and there. And I don't know how it works with TV, where with some shows they do have multiple vendors, but I know, but because, I mean, with a show like Age of Resistance, which is pretty much, your feature film quality, visual effects, or, like that for Age of Resistance, that, you must have been put in a very unique sort of spot where it's like everything was all in-house.
It was very helpful. It's weird. It's just weird timing that I've worked on 3 shows that for the most part were sole vendor. I mean, Jungle Book was 10% of it was Weta. The whole King Louis stuff was Weta, but Lion King was all MPC. So then to jump from that to then Dark Crystal, that was all DNEG. It was kind of like, now just finishing this year a show that's been multi-vendor has been an interesting task. But it's not usually common, but it's becoming more common because it makes sense if you can do it. Because then if you need something, now being on a multi-vendor show, things like your color science, and I can't even say all the terminology, that's some really geeky stuff right there, but it's so easy to get things lost in translation. So, when you have something this big, it makes sense, but it also makes the project very long. Like, I was on it for 9-10 months, where some people there were on it for like 2-3 years. Like, it's insane. So it's cool, but I mean,
yeah, especially, I mean, only doing like 2 episodes and just being there for, working on that show for 9 months, just purely based on, 2 episodes alone. Like, it does make me think, it's like, if there was only one visual effects editor, like, it would take you years essentially to get this show out. Like, you needed so many people, like, and just the logistics, everyone to be essentially on the same page to to make it all work.
Yeah. It was really smart because, like, usually visual effect editors, it's kind of like, I mean, I guess for, like, even, like, Lion King, we all just knew all the sequences. But for Dark Crystal, which is actually, I think, bigger than Lion King, I could be wrong, don't quote me on that, it made sense to be like, okay, you are in charge of these episodes, blah, blah, blah. But we also did help each other on other episodes. So it was one of those, like, if someone was in a review session or was, bogged down by something, then I'd be like, okay, cool, I'll open episode 6. So we had to have every project structured the same, so we literally could go in and go, okay, I never seen episode 6, but I know where I'm going, so if I need to check this sequence, that sequence, so you did still become accustomed to other sequences or other episodes, but it was one of those, if anyone had any technical questions, it was like, episode 4 and 9, that is Shannon kind of thing. But that's why they were like saying, put your name down for all of them, because you did touch all of them, but like, the ones you were in charge of, which is funny because, like, when they did the closing credits, some of, like, I'm on episode 1, 2, I don't even think I'm on episode 9 because, like, it's so hard to, visual effect editors especially, it's very difficult to get an on-screen credit. And just lucked out that last year I happened to have 2 on-screen credits that's the only 2 I've ever had. And it's ironic, it was only within like 2 months of each other, and I probably, like, for my show that just wrapped now, definitely won't have an on-screen credit. So when they were like, you'll get an on-screen credit, but it might not be with your episodes, it was like, I don't care, I'm so happy with that.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, exactly,
so it's funny,
yeah.
I think my name is actually on, like, episode 1, 2, maybe 4, I don't know, I think 4 of my name isn't on there. But yeah. Yeah,
some other episodes you only touch them a couple of times, but yeah, still got a credit for them.
Exactly. It's like, hey,
I mean, even for myself, yeah. Oh yeah, like, especially in TV in Australia, like most shows don't have credits. It's just like, oh no, get to the next thing, and most credits only like shows in the past, like if they're doing it internationally, like there would be credits, so it'd be good, back in the day where it's like, they would have time to have credits, but these days they just
what happens is like
that's it,
the credits will roll, but then it'll become like a very small picture-in-picture, and they're like,
oh yes,
it'll be like a teaser
or go
to
really
the next
fast,
one.
yeah.
You're like, yeah.
Yeah, it's a bit like that Simpsons, and when Bart was I don't know, I think he was on that Krusty show and just trying to find his name in the credits. It's like, that's me. It's like, that doesn't bought Samson or like something like that, and yeah
Definitely.
Yeah, but it certainly is good, when you see your name on there. It's like, I worked on this show, and no, that is so awesome. It
makes the parents back home very proud.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. That's so cool. And I guess, like, when you got involved with the show, like, I mean, you sort of got involved, like, when they started shooting the show. Of course, you had the pitch video, but that was quite a few years before production started. So you sort of jumped in during the probably. I mean, because what was the thing like? Because I mean, post production was probably happening concurrently with shooting it, right? Or was there, like, took a while to get you footage across sometimes, and depending on, I guess, how they shot things, like.
To be honest with you, I don't want to be wrong. I don't know if things were filmed while we were doing it, or if it just was taking that long to process. So sadly, it might have been, but it may not have been. So I don't want to say yes or no either way. I do know that is possible. Like, for example, The Walking Dead, like, they literally film it and do, like, the visual effects with, and that's why, like, there's no more episodes, is because they can't film anymore. So I do know that's possible, but for Dark Crystal, I'm not sure. I do know it was shot in London, but I don't know if it was doing it in tandem. There must have been a period where it was, but by the time I showed up on the scene, I don't know. I just knew footage is coming in from episode 4 and 9, so sorry about that. I wish I could comment better on that.
Oh, no, that's cool. Yeah,
I don't want to be wrong.
No, that's fine. No, it's all good. I know it's one of those things where it's like, oh, if you got something wrong and, you know, you have listeners and that, it's like, oh, yeah, I'll tell you got
exactly.
something wrong or whatnot. Yeah. Yeah, that's cool. And I guess, like, you know, overall, like with the show, like, was there ever some, like, whether it's moments from episode 4 or 9 or any of the other episodes that, you know, you're looking at this stuff that was coming through and then you were just thinking to myself head, you know, how you know, how we're going to accomplish like this scene or this shot, like
I don't know, because it's such a vast world. It wasn't until I was doing, because like I did an in-house kind of finals reel, which is basically some of the best shots, and there were shots of this like almost like flying manta ray looking creature that is just gorgeous. I think the moment,
those are amazing. The crystal skimmers, yeah, especially at the start. I think it was like the start of episode 7. We had the, you know, the title, and you know it would do the sort of the fly over the title, and I definitely love that little masking trick there.
So it's so tricky because like in the production phase when I was doing it as a job, you're so focused because there's so much. You're so focused on your episodes. I think that's why I actually enjoyed watching it as a viewer, because there was a lot that wasn't spoiled for me, because you'll check things, but then you're like, out of context, you don't understand what it means. You're just making sure that you A/B it, you know, going, yep, okay, yeah, it's matched perfectly. The numbers are matching, so you don't understand its context. So I loved personally the puppets doing a puppet show. Like, that was almost like that is the coolest thing. Like, and I know they got a guy off of YouTube that does these finger puppet things, but everything visually just was beautiful. Like, even my breath was taken away when I watched it as a viewer, because you're so knife point focused on your episodes, and there's just so much. Like, there were times I had to come in on the weekend, so I didn't have people asking me questions, so I could just get my stuff done. That I can't say a moment of, wow, how are they going to pull that off? I do know there were moments where I was like, wow, that looks cool. And some of them are even like kind of simple, where it was like the puppets doing a puppet show, which I thought was just such a fun little touch. And I know it's like a famous YouTuber kind of came in and did it, and that was kind of a fun touch.
I was just going to say, that was like definitely one of my favorite sort of scenes from episode 7, just that the puppet show within a puppet show. And it's one of those things where it's like, it could have either gone either way. It could have gone like really bad. But the outcome, like the way it was presented, was just incredible. And just, it was sort of fun, like as it starts of, you know, a nod to puppetry, but it's certainly like, It really surprised me, like as a viewer. I'm just like, wow, you know, they really pulled off this scene a lot better than what I thought it was going to end up being. So yeah.
Yeah, I'll say the thing that gave us all goosebumps at work, and this is just a tribute to music choice, because that was one of my first things I did before being a visual effects editor. Was I was the promotional editor at MPC for 3 years, so I did all the reels, kind of promoting all the work. And I know music choice is very important. It was actually that first teaser trailer. We must have played that hundreds of times at work, because it was so cool. Because a lot of Netflix, I'm finding out that a lot of Netflix trailers literally come out like a week before it goes online. And with Dark Crystal, they purposely like really not drug out, but they extended that. So when we saw the teaser with music and, you know, seeing, you know, the forest and like the fairies are kind of spinning, you just, I'm getting goosebumps talking about it now. You just were like, this all makes it worthwhile. And just seeing people on Twitter and Facebook and all my friends, because like I said, I knew of it, but I didn't, you know, I hadn't seen the original. That just to see people so excited, it felt good to just go, it's worth it. Okay, this is awesome. Because I think that's the tricky thing. I understand people, you know, they'll diss Cats or The Lion King or things, but you have to understand there are people who are working 12, 14-hour days, and they were putting their heart and soul in it. So we were doing that on Dark Crystal. So to see with the trailer and everyone really excited, and I mean, I was tearing up. I was like, that is just amazing. And seeing, you know, the claw grab the crystal and the chains and it goes down, and you're just like, oh man, stuff is going down. It was very exciting. And I was
yeah, you're certainly bringing back those memories. And I mean, it is actually interesting we're talking about this, and you know, like this month essentially, like I think is the 1 year anniversary, like of that teaser trailer. And I mean, that trailer was just marvelous, and just sort of set the tone, and just very fairy tale like and very beautiful. Just the way that teaser trailer was all set up, and that was a big thing. Like, I was really glad that they brought out the teaser a bit earlier, especially, you know, trying to introduce this franchise to new audiences, to at least give them, hey, you know, this show's coming out in 3 months. We're giving you this time right now to sort of get your head around it. And even I think myself and my co-hosts, like with Jamie and Ethan, and we were just, you know, trying to break down the trailer, and just it was at times just hard to put things into words, because we were just so blown away with everything that we're seeing. It's unlike anything. And yeah.
I'm so honored to say that. And I was only on it for 9 months, but I felt so honored to be on something like that, and to just see puppetry. I mean, I say this about the sequel trilogy about Star Wars. I think what I loved was they were bringing the practical back, because visual effects needs to be used as a tool, not as we can just do it all. And so I always said, though, on my Star Wars podcast, I was like, Dark Crystal basically did that beautiful marriage of the practical and the visual, and it should be a case study on how you can make it work. And yeah, so we're just kind of all sitting here going, okay, when's season 2 coming? And then of course, sadly, COVID-19 happened. But
yes, I know things have with COVID, I think that definitely has delayed things, whether they're going to announce it or not. And I think we're just at a very unique stage at the moment, especially I think for Netflix, because I think I think we've even like sort of done our statistics and stuff, and I think this would be the longest time that Netflix has would announce whether a show's been cancelled or renewed or whatnot. So we're still having our fingers crossed if we're going to get that, you know, that continuation of the story, because I know especially there's so much more story to tell with the world of Thra, with Age of Resistance. So which is really cool.
Yeah, it's I think what they might do next time is some of the more, I say simple, it's not, but it's I think a lot of the cleanup, which is basically things like rod removal and puppeteer removal, and I think what they've learned, this is all speculation, this is not what I've been told, but just speculating, that that might go to another company, and then DNEG will do more the big kind of, okay, here's the facial augmentations and things, but who knows. But we're all, you know, I've always said, you know, I volunteer as tribute. I'm ready to go for season 2. There's a good 1, 2, 3 of us, because sadly companies change and people leave and things like that. So 3 out of the 6 are still there. You know, one of the leads is still there, and we're like, yeah, well, sign us up. We're ready to go. Like, yeah, it's because that's the thing. Like, yeah, I think because like one of the people I work with has a kind of differing opinion, which is fair enough. That, you know, to them, a project is a project. He doesn't care what he works on. It just whatever. Or for me, it's like, you kind of want to like the project because you're going to be dealing with this from a minimum of 6 months to sometimes 2 years. Lion King was nearly 2 years. You got to make sure you're not going to be sick of it, because you got to be working on it for a while. But so that's definitely one I would love to go back to, and I think it's a big staple in Netflix kind of category, that it really, I think, raised the bar for TV production and streaming production, to just show that it's like these originals, that it's like, no, there's some money behind it, there's a production value behind it, and it showed visual effects for TV really lifted the bar. And The Mandalorian did that too, but that Mandalorian was several companies. It wasn't just ILM yet, but the bar is being raised. So sorry, that's my little TED talk. But it's an exciting time. So
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's gonna be really interesting. Like the next probably 5 years of visual effects, like in TV alone. Especially some of the things we've been learning sort of behind the scenes. I mean, with The Mandalorian as well, with the way with the projection on sets, essentially 360 kind of things, which is that's like unlike any other show's done that. So it's going to be really interesting to see in the future, other productions, other TV shows are going to take advantage of that technology. And who knows, that I don't know whether they would do that with Dark Crystal, but it is something, it's like all these ideas are flowing in my head. It's like all these potential possibilities. So, which is awesome. And so I know, yeah. And so like with, with working on the show, I know you mentioned that you hadn't seen the original film beforehand. Did you, like when you got on board with the show, did you decide to watch the film first, or did you like, no, I'm going to, not watch the show to, just to...
It was funny. We had it digital in our library, because we have a lot of films for reference materials. It was there, but they said you can watch it if you want, but the brilliance about this show, it's a prequel. You don't have to know what's going on. So like I said, I didn't. I do know, I forget, it's in someone's Dreamfast. There is a nod to... There is a shot of, I don't know the character's name in the original Dark Crystal, but him putting the shard in the crystal. That's from the original, because I remember my better half losing her mind because she was like, oh, that's from the original, so I was like, oh, okay.
I think with I think it was episode 8 when we were seeing these visions, and like we saw a vision of like of Breya holding little Gelfling baby, and that part is sort of in the film. And same with I think that famous shot with Jen, but in the film, but in the show it's Rian. So that was kind of really interesting to see, like how potential how that's going to play out in season 2, like those kind of key moments and those little very trying to bridge the gaps ever so slightly between the show and the Dark Crystal Age of Resistance.
Yeah. It's funny, it was almost called Age of Rebellion, and they changed it to Age of Resistance.
Yeah, because I think it was because of because of Star Wars, essentially, that I think back in I think when they were trying to develop it as a TV animated series, that was going to be the title, and then sort of it's 2 Star Wars, and then they call it Age of Resistance, and then of course we got Resistance in Star Wars, so that was kind of funny, like how that happened.
Well, now, and the Star Wars universe has now been broken down into, you have the Age of Republic, the Age of Rebellion, and the Age of Resistance. So it's still there, but
I know,
whatever. We're all fans. We all crossover.
Oh, totally,
thing, so,
and I mean, there's lots of crossovers with Star Wars and Dark Crystal, from the original film, and even with Age of Resistance, with Mark Hamill voicing the scientist. So I thought, when we first heard about all these casting announcements, just how insane that they were going with all these, big movie stars, and especially Mark Hamill. It's like, wow, like, as a huge Star Wars fan myself, like I was just like, wow, Netflix are really, taking up another another notch or another level at the time, Yeah, so we'll have to wrap up for this episode of Trial by Stone. So Shannon, I just want to say thank you so much for talking visual effects on, with the show that you worked on. Again, like the show itself was really incredible, and just the visual effects that, yourself and so many other, artists and animators and everyone like from DNAG did just such an incredible job. Really did us proud, essentially. So no, thank you so much for being on the show. And of course, how can listeners find out more about, where they can find you?
Yeah, first of all, thank you for having me on. I always enjoy kind of geeking out about all things kind of visual effects and Dark Crystal and everything. So when I saw your podcast, I was like, I want to reach out. I would love to talk about this and just kind of, I think see if you're interested. But yeah, you can find my personal Twitter. I'm just at Shenanigan, but it's spelled SHENANIGEN. And yeah, if you are interested in my Star Wars podcast, you can find me on that Twitter, which is at PCGE, which is Postcards from the Galaxy's Edge, _ podcast. And finally, sorry, I do a lot of them, it's been a bit on a bit of a hiatus, but I actually do a visual effect podcast called Pending Final. I'll send Philip kind of all the links and things so it can be maybe in the show notes and things, but we had a first season where we kind of broke down kind of each position in visual effects. What does it mean? It's with my co-host Helen, who is more the production side of visual effects, and I'm more the technical side. So if you want to learn more about visual effects, we're at Pending Final. Yes. So yeah, I'll send all those links and things. But so yes, I'm very active in a lot of different fingers in the pie. But yeah.
That's awesome. No, thank you so much. And yeah, as you said, and we'll definitely put these links in the show notes, so all our listeners can listen to your other podcasts and all your other work. So thank you so much.
Yeah, and I might be reaching out to you. I might, because I make a Star Wars series of postcards. Might as well make a Dark Crystal series of postcards from all the different lands. That might be a bit fun. So I might go to you, Philip, and be like,
I know.
What's this one called?
We have to. Yeah, I know. We'll have to figure out, because I know you do postcards like based on each planet. So I'm just trying to think of a planet in Star Wars that closely resembles to Thra, or that sort of environment. So
oh no, I would literally just do that.
Oh right, just as
yeah. Yeah.
All right.
Oh yeah. Its own series.
Yeah, bring it on.
Yeah.
All right, cool.
Might be reaching out to you and being like,
sounds awesome. Cool.
Have all the different clan symbols and everything. So yeah. Cool. Well, thank you very much for having me. It's been fantastic. Thank you so much.
If you'd like to get in contact with the show, you can do so at darkcrystalpodcast@gmail.com. Like us on Facebook at facebook.com/darkcrystalpodcast. Follow us on Instagram at darkcrystalpodcast and on Twitter at darkcrystalpod. If you'd like to support the show, subscribe to the podcast, write a review on Apple Podcasts, and consider being our Patreon supporter at patreon.com/darkcrystalpodcast. Thank you all so much, and stay tuned for the next episode of Trial by Stone. This podcast is brought to you by ThamesCon, bringing conventions to Oxford and London, including the Great Conjunction, the first ever Dark Crystal convention in the world. For more information, visit their website at www.thegreatconjunction.com. And to our Crystal of Truth TR Patreon member Albert Chessa. Albert's a fellow Aussie and Dark Crystal fan who's actually been on Trial by Stone as a guest before. He makes intricate pattern prints, the kind you'd find a mystic carving into the sands in the forests of Thra. So if you like the Dark Crystal, there's a good chance you'll like his patterns too. You can check out his art and entertainment podcast on Apple, Stitcher or Google just by searching Albert Chessa. That's Chessa, Chessa. And check out shirts, products with his patterns on them at albertchessa.com/store.